Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer DeVito, and I am going to be the moderator for today's session. Before we begin, we do have a few reminders. We have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. I'm going to post the link in chat. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at that email address. You are able to enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. Please be sure that your microphone is muted. During the Q&A, wait until you are asked to unmute before you speak. You can also use the Q&A button and upvote the questions. And also, this session is being recorded. And this afternoon's session is called Leveling Up Your Lesson Planning, Using AI to Build Bibliographic Library Lessons by Dr. Sean Cordes. Dr. Cordes is a professor at Western Illinois University, where he teaches bibliographic instruction, library credit courses, and coordinates the library instruction program. His research interests include human-computer interaction in the teaching, learning, and training process, and the development of 21st century information skills. He has published scholarly articles and research in the area of information seeking and library instruction and management. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sean Cordes.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Sean Cordes. I'm going to talk a bit today, just briefly about what AI is. I know that everybody's been kind of getting into the bandwagon with this sort of thing. And so, hold on just a second. So I kind of want to bring things up to speed with that. And I'm going to get my view going here. Oh, no, I lost screen sharing. Hold on a second. Oh, we just did this when we started, and now it's not working. Okay. Oop. Yeah. Okay, my apologies for that. We should be on. So my name is Sean Cordes. And the first thing I want to talk about today is large language models, to give just a brief introduction on what we're working with. What I'm going to do today is talk briefly about how to work with AI through a chat interface or a conversationalist interface. And basically, this is all built on the principle of large language models. So we're looking at deep learning algorithms that can form a neural network to develop context. And what happens is that they've given access to these models with large sets of data, everything that they can get their hands on the internet, documents, reports, research articles. And there's tools called transformers that allow this data to be processed so that the large language model can make predictions about what's next. Autofill was probably the first one of those things that you saw, and you know it was kind of frustrating, and it still is. And so it's gotten a lot better at predicting what we want in terms of outcomes from what we put into it. But that's the key kind of to this presentation is we see AI all over the place. And a lot of times I'm not even sure where it's coming from or where it's operating inside an application. But in the basic sense, we train the AI by what we tell it with the inputs by using Chat GPT or Llama or one of the other AI conversation applications. So I want to ask first too, and open up the chat for this, of where you might have seen examples in everyday life. Of course, it's in Siri and Alexa, Microsoft Office. And one of the experiences that I just had recently with MS Office was recording a video for a class. And when I recorded the video for the class, I noticed that there was a rehearsal coach inside PowerPoint. So now you can go in, give your presentation, talk through your slides, and it will tell you if you're talking too fast, if you're talking too slow, how many times you say and during the presentation, and whether you're talking too closely off your screens or you're coming up with your own content as you go. And it will actually give you a report at the end so that you have that formative assessment that you can fine-tune your processes with. So kind of what I wanted to ask, and go ahead and put in the chat now while I'm going through this slide, what examples have you run into in your everyday life or on the job where AI is becoming apparent as a tool that you're having to integrate in with your workflow? One of the things I saw today, I had to go to the dentist this morning, and when they took my x-rays, they now have AI in there that will tell you how much calcium you have on your teeth and where you might have a potential cavity before you even see the dentist. It will highlight those things on the screen and give you an explanation for what each of them means. So it kind of helped inform me as a patient, but it was another example of how AI has influenced everything that we're doing and will continue to do so. Of all of these, I use Grammarly quite a bit. I use the free version, but it integrates with all my tools, and it's a great addition to spell checker, confidence, tone, and improving writing. So when we talk about creating content using AI conversations, we're talking about prompts. And so the prompt is the direction that you give the AI. And you have to craft and engineer these things. And the examples that I have to show today are complete in the form, and we'll give the outputs that are on the example screens. And a lot of the AI training you see, they will give you prompts. OpenAI has a whole set of administrative prompts and learning prompts that you can use to create lessons. But a lot of these have been worked through. So the examples that I'm using, in a number of cases, I've had to refine them as I've gone along. And that's where honing the prompt creation comes in. Because one of the things I noticed, it would give me part of the answer I wanted, but not the other part, or would combine two parts. And so you have to be very careful about the language you use and what you tell it, because ultimately the AI will only give back what it thinks that you want based on what you've said. So it's essential for maximizing the effectiveness of the tools that you use. And it requires you to read the prompt. So a lot of times, one of the concerns is an over-reliance on technology, where we'll just let the AI do the work. What I'm finding more lately is that it's become a better editing tool for me. So I am forced to go back through and make sure that it's not giving me hallucinations or biased outputs, or that it's staying on track with what I want. And so I have to go back through and work with the text afterwards, pretty much in every case. And so it's not replacing what I'm doing. It's making it a lot easier on my fingers for typing, for one thing. So it's modifying my workflow and the processes that I'm using. And I'm actually able, in some cases, to speed things up and still get a high quality output. So some of the things, and I'm going to point these out when I go through the examples, is that you want to be specific about the topic. Tell it that you're doing information science, or tell it that you're doing library instruction. Contextualize it. Tell it that you're doing library instruction and evaluation techniques. Add actions or tasks. So give me a summary, right, of the CRAP method, or give me an outline for a session on how to search databases, or give me a list of the top 5 things that people should be concerned about when looking for bias on the internet. You want to give it a task to do and tell it what the task involves. Another thing, and this is particularly important, is using parameters. So you can set word counts and exclusions. A lot of times I will tell it to take a set of paragraphs and turn it into a list of 100 words. Or in one case where I was using it recently, it kept referring, in a lecture that I was given, it kept referring to me as the text instead of the instructor. So I can say, replace text with the word instructor, and it will take all of those instances out and replace it with more contextually based information. This requires an iterative approach, and I'll show an example of that later on. And this is in order to refine the output. So initially I might put something in and it will give me a response that's too long. I'll modify it by saying, give me a shorter word count, or like I mentioned before, including or excluding certain words or phrases. Bias is always an issue potentially with AI because it doesn't understand nuances in language yet very well. It's getting better, but right now it just puts back what it knows to generate in terms of context for your question or your suggestion. It just gives you back what it knows based on the information it has. It's not always good at putting two and two together and coming up with 4. Sometimes it comes up with 5 and sometimes nothing at all. But it's a conversationalist type tool. So you talk to it like you would a person in many ways. And you tell it who you are. So if I start my examples, I'll say, I'm an instructor of information science, or I'm an instructor of information literacy, working with first-generation college students to learn about evaluating information. That gives it some context. I might give it examples. For instance, if a number of my examples use the CRAP technique, because a lot of people are familiar with that. And so I may say, use the CRAAP technique to give me examples on currency, relevancy, accuracy, authority, and purpose. I'll ask it to justify answers. You can ask it in many cases now outside of ChatGPT 3.5, but a lot of them are Gemini and others are attached to the internet, so you can ask for references. Of course, you have to check for bias and inaccuracy in those too. You can ask for justification by having it provide examples to you and evaluating those examples in terms of what you want. Play around and experiment with it. One of the first things that I did to try out these parameters and processes was to have it do a review for me on running shoes. And so I did some research and I looked at the top 5 marathon running shoes and kind of cross-checked that to make sure that it was consistent across different reviews on the internet. And then I had the AI review it, and it gave me startlingly close examples to what I had found on the internet in terms of why they were the best brands, what you could expect in terms of durability and softness and cushioning, and why my brand was the best one, the Adidas Supernova. And it came up with plausible reasons and a good argument for that. And it also gave a rating at the end on how the sneaker was. It gave it a 4 out of 5. I found when I tried different conversation tools, different AIs, they would give me different ratings. So anywhere from a 4 to a 5. So again, you have to interpret it and put a human element into these things to come up with your justification based on the content that the AI provides. Sometimes you can just tell it what you want and it'll keep continuing going forward. And sometimes it just comes up with completely arbitrary answers. For instance, you could put a poem in there and have it review your poem. But if it's not in a format, you could put a haiku in. If it's not in 575 syllables and 3 lines, it doesn't understand that it's a haiku. It just says, I don't understand what this language is. It doesn't make sense to me. But if you put it in a rhyme, it'll say it's a poem. So it doesn't understand all of the intricacies about language that we do yet. Now, here are some of the examples of how you can use AI. And these are examples that you can use for BI instruction. You can also use them for course development. And the way that this was thrust upon me in a sense, I could say. We had a course that was an online course at Western Illinois. That's Introduction to Research Methods in our General Studies program. And it was going online, so we needed a lot of quick online content. So I was able to take notes and handouts in the textbook and generate lesson plans for each one of those things, including the objectives, and also generate content for each chapter for the lectures. So I found that that was my do or die experience for it. And now it's kind of my ride or die tool to go to when I'm trying to get things done in a timely manner and still done professionally. So some of the things that you can do in the BI classroom or in developing course materials, you can create objectives and lesson plans. Summaries and examples. It will allow you to build formative and summative assessments and test materials and diagnostic tests. And in general, it teaches students about critical thinking. Both from the perspective of when we explain how we do this to students, they understand that it's actually work involved, but they also understand how they can use these tools to improve their knowledge base and solve problems. So what I want you to do, if you have a laptop or a computer right now available to you, you can do it on the phone, and you know where an AI assisted tool is, you can go there and open it up now and go in and follow along with the examples I have on the screen as I go through these, and we look at the results, and you can modify them as you go along too. Excuse me. And you can modify them as you go along too, to try to work on your own prompts as we go. So in my first example, I'm looking at creating goals and objectives. And one of the things that I want to make sure that I do is create a good context for this. So I tell it who I am. I'm an expert library instructor, and I'm looking at clear, concise learning goals and objectives for a lesson on evaluating information using the CRAP method. I tell it who I am, what I want it to do, and what I'm doing it for in that context. I give it parameters about how many objectives I want. I'm figuring I can only probably cover 4 objectives in a bibliographic session. So I'm saying, give me 4 objectives about the CRAP method, make it concise and easy to understand, because again, I'm doing this in a certain time frame, and I want to be able to get my message across clearly to students in that amount of time. And I want them to have measurable outcomes for my objectives. So in the past, when I've gone in and done BA instruction, and it's always hard to get time to do assessments at the end, but this will help me scope out my assessment and create those tools. So if I'm doing this and an instructor says, I'm not sure how much this is helping my students, I can build a short survey for them that measures learning in the classroom, and either forward it to them later or hopefully have time to do it in the classroom itself. I tell it who I'm teaching to. If I'm teaching to graduate students, their knowledge evaluation techniques is going to be different than if I'm teaching first-year students. So I want to make sure the AI knows that we're looking at entry-level students. And so for goals and objectives, I'm looking at my goals and objectives here. And here's the goals that it gave me. So it asked to describe the CRAP method. And you can see in learning goals, I'll just do a little bit of instructional design. In learning goals, we look at the broad outcomes that we want, okay? And some of the conditions that students are learning under. But goals themselves are not necessarily objectifiable and measurable. So we don't see any measurement techniques here. I'm looking at these look like they're goals to me. Students will be able to define. It uses Bloom's taxonomy. So it's defining the level, and defined as one of the lower levels of knowledge acquisition. So we're defining and explaining 5 components. It's included all of the 5 components in there for me, so I know that it's on track with the CRAP method. I want students to evaluate a sample after I give a demonstration. I want them to be able to tell which are the credible sources and which aren't. And I want them to be able to incorporate these into a list as a small formative assessment. But one thing it's not giving me is clear objectives about what they need to know and what the outcomes are going to be. So I had to go in and do this. I said, give it goals and objectives, but it pretty much just gave me the goals. So I had to clarify that with another prompt. And then it was able to give me objectives. So then for my 4 goals, I have it paralleled to the goals that I have. It still has the same headings: describe, apply, differentiate, and incorporate. But now it gives me measurable outcomes for each one of how I can measure these. So to define and explain, they have to explain each one of the areas in a short written response. Another way to assess a source, they would complete an evaluation worksheet with different check mark areas for each one of the areas of the evaluation method to demonstrate their ability to critically analyze each one of the components, and so on. So differentiate credible and non-credible sources. We would have a short set of information resources in a multiple choice format, and I'll show you that in a minute. So it generates different ways for measuring the goals. And I didn't tell it at all what types of formative assessments or summative assessments to use. It just knows to make those diagnostics. And so that's really handy. I can come up with these on my own, but I would have to think through them. closely, or if I'm sharing this with another instructor, I don't want to have to explain each one of these that I would do, so I could just shoot this across in an email to them. The second session example for a session that I want to show is for a lesson plan. So again, I tell it who I am. And in this case, I'm teaching information literacy. So I'm an information literacy instructor. I have 45 minutes usually for my BI sessions, sometimes an hour and 15. So I want a 45-minute research session, and I'm giving it that parameter just to make it that long, of basically what it thinks that long is. Again, I'm using the CRAP method for all my examples, so they kind of parallel, and you can see the different ways that the examples and strategies work with them. I'm including all 5 areas, and this time I want to use Gagne's 9 events of instruction, which basically takes me from introducing and motivating students all the way through practice and demonstration, feedback, and the assessment process. So I want to make sure that it includes all 9 events of instruction, and I'm going to have to double check those because even though I've used them a lot, I don't necessarily remember what they are in order, and I want to make sure that it follows the process. So then I tell it to write the outline, include the presentation, and also I practice an evaluation tool in there. And this is kind of a long one, but it does give me all of the 9 sections. It gives them to me in order, and it gives me a nice, concise outline of what I want to do in terms of informing learners of why it's important and what the objectives are, stimulating their prior recall of learning. And this is the same type of outline if I was outlining a lesson plan for my information science course for graduate students, how I could use this now as an example for how to lay out instructional strategies. Okay, and in the classroom for bibliographic instruction, I can use this as my main outline for developing the content for my lesson plan as well. And notice I told it to provide assessment, so it's got an assessment of performance. It uses a short quiz or evaluation to do that. And then I've got enhancing and retention transfer. So all of Gagne's 9 events, it is included in here. It's created goals and objectives for me, and still it's following through with the goals and objectives that it created before into the lesson plan. I'm going to stop for just a second before we look at the next example, if that's okay. And I want to look at some of the chat webinar in here. These are things that people have found in their everyday life. So let's see, when we have at the grocery store, I was flagged at self-checkout because something was left in your cart. So it was probably scanning your cart to see if there were any items there. I wish they would do that when I leave items on the little checkout thing. I also wish that it would interpret how much time I spend checking out and give me some compensation for that. I can go back and show any of the prompts again. If you want to type in the chat of which one, if you know if it was for goals, objectives, or lesson plans that we've looked through so far. The first one, okay. Let me go ahead and go through the examples and we'll go back through them if that's okay. Because I'm not sure I can get back from here. I'll have to go to it and get out of the share. You can have the AI summarize for you. So using the topic of analyzing library usage data in a list, summarize the most important points for ensuring patron satisfaction. So in here, we're using this in terms of training library. It can be used for training library staff on customer service. Make sure the audience understands, make sure the AI understands that this is an audience of a group of library faculty and staff of 100 words or less. To ensure patron satisfaction, it's crucial for faculty and staff to focus on these key points. So it understands who my audience was, and it makes sure it's including both of them. It's also giving me a list of the top 5 things that it thinks are key points for following for customer service. Understanding user needs, improving collection management, using data-driven analysis, optimizing service position with analyzing processes and streamlining processes, enhancing and user experience through the design of library spaces, website interfaces, and digital services. So I could refine this more and say, I just want to know how to increase satisfaction using databases or checking in and out books. Here, it's given me a nice broad-based thing. If I wanted to begin a user satisfaction survey, these are different categories that I could use to develop a survey from to get feedback from library patrons as well. And I could also use it for training faculty and staff in each one of these areas. We can create examples. So acting like a library instructor, create examples for each 5 areas of the CRAP test so students can understand up front when I'm giving my demonstration what each one of them mean. So again, it's given me a nice, succinct example outline, and you can tell they're fairly succinct because I'm fitting them all on one slide, and I managed to fit all of the outcomes on one slide. Part of that did have to do with giving it parameters about length. So it gives me an example of relevancy, currency, accuracy. When researching the impact of social media on mental health, it's essential to understand the currency. A study published in 2020 is probably more reliable and up to date than 2005. That's something that I would tell my students about the span. I might say 10-year span for research, but it's understanding the fact that gaps in research lead to differences in changes in the field and how we interpret things. Relevancy, it's talking about the civil rights movement, ensures that information aligns with the research need and gives accurate insights into the topic. So you would want to use a renowned historian specializing in that area, a speech or a paper or some other form of output from that expert. That also falls into authority. So there's kind of some overlap. Accuracy, we're looking about climate change data. It uses data as an accuracy point. That's very clear to people about how data can change and how the need for that's to be accurate. And so we can look at internationally recognized organizations. Again, it uses kind of authority to show these are examples of people who will give you accurate information. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with its ideas about accuracy in this case. It's good on authority, talks about scholarly articles, very much in line with information literacy, and the purpose. So if you're looking at benefits of a medication, you need to investigate the purpose behind it. Is it for sale? Is it something that's widely or freely available? Is this something that's going to be needed for everybody? Like in the case of the pandemic when they were encouraging people to get vaccinations. You can also use the AI as an editor. So acting like an experienced information science professor, give me one paragraph about why instructional design is important. You can tell it to adjust the tone. So I don't want this necessarily to be a familiar tone or a friendly tone. I want it to be engaging and motivating, but I also want it to be a smart kind of professional tone. And then I tell it to make the following points. Instructional design allows teachers to create clear learning objectives and instructional strategies for learning. So that's what I want the context to be. And I tell it just to give me an outline first. And then I tell it, take your outline and improve upon that and refine it, and then write me the final paragraph. And in this case, it gives me an outline of 3 points, 4 points. Then it takes those 4 points and improves them, adds a little more content. So the first one for introduction says introduce the importance of instructional design in libraries, way too broad for a learning goal. It improves this by saying, highlight the essential role of library instruction design in libraries to enhance learning experience and engage patrons effectively. And so this is more focused into the point about why it's important to give you learning experiences that help improve your information skills. In this example, we're going to look at how AI can help as a teaching assistant. So if I have a teaching assistant and I tell them to build a formative assessment, I want them to make a quiz. I want them to look up how to make formative assessments and quizzes in diagnostic form. And I want them to tell the students why formative assessment is important. So then the AI is going to construct several questions to quiz the audience. It should be multiple choice questions and give plausible alternative responses. So I don't want just the correct answer. I want other answers that could be plausible as well as distractor terms. And I could also tell it to give examples of what the correct answer is. I didn't do that in this example because it was so big, but it will give me examples for each one and tell me why that one is correct and why the others are incorrect. So in this case, I'm just going to have it give me an answer key. Which of the following best describes information literacy? Ability to use technology proficiently, the skills to locate and evaluate information effectively, the talent to write creatively, and D, the expertise in conducting experiments. And it gives me B. The answer is B, the skill to locate and evaluate information effectively. You could also argue that A, using technology proficiently would be part of this as well. So I might adjust that prompt to say the ability to use books proficiently to make it not so close in the distractors. So even though it gives me a nice formative assessment with answers and it could give me examples, I still have to go through and check each answer and response to make sure that it meets the level of learning that I'm looking for and isn't too close or too far apart to make the question too difficult or easy. All of this comes down to being able to use interactive directions. So if I tell it that I'm an experienced teacher, I want it to ask me 2 questions, the concept I want explained, and then I want it to wait for me to give it the concept. And then I want it to ask me who the audience is. Now I could type these things in, but I might want to take my time in between each one and ask them separately. So it gives me good separate paragraph responses. And so I'll ask it to ponder the first question and give me a response before the second. And then I want it to look up the concept and examples of the concept that I'm giving it. Give me a clear multi-paragraph explanation and give me 2 specific examples and 5 analogies that I can use to understand the concept. So I'm telling it what to do. Give me examples, give me analogies, give me a list. You've got to tell it what to do and refine these as you go along. So this is what I told it first at the top in the blue part. And it says, sure, what concept would you like me to explain? Information literacy. Great, and who's your audience? First-year college students. So then it goes on and delves into the concept of information literacy. But this gives an example of how I would go back and forth when I check its responses against what I want. Here I'm using as an opening to my query. But I could go, you didn't explain information literacy, you explained instructional design. I want information literacy in terms of library science. Okay, and that would give me that kind of information and it would hone in and give me a different response. So the last couple of slides that I have here, and then we'll go back through question and answers and look at the prompts again. First of all, as we've kind of seen with the way that it's emerging in every aspect of life, it's here, folks. I have been constantly learning tools as library instructors. We're constantly learning new tools. The trick to this is it's becoming embedded into things like Camtasia and Word and PowerPoint. And it doesn't always tell us where these things are being included. So we're having to find out and explore all over again. Even tools that we know are becoming regenerated. A good example of that is Photoshop, where you can create your photo and then have it add realistic details to the background. And so we've never been able to do it before. It's an additional process, but it's here. So explore hands-on with these tools when you can in your free time. And like I said, you can make it fun first. Use it for shopping on Amazon and to ask it, what the 5 top 5 top uses of 5 top swimming pool pumps that you can find for an Intex swimming pool, or find the top 5 casual shoes for men. Have fun with it, play with it, share your responses in class. So I've used these techniques to build bibliographic lessons for this fall, but I wasn't at the point where I was confident in sharing the examples. I'm going to build that in. starting the next fall when I do my BI sessions in. Ask meaningful questions, be interactive with it, train students to critique their own questions. So when I've gone through this training session today, and we're doing faculty training sessions that are available for students as well in our Center for Information and Teaching and Research that we're going to be picking up now at the end of 2024. So what we've done through this process is kind of critique the prompts that I've made already. And I pointed out some details about how to refine these and make these things better. And it can be, you can foster curiosity and excitement for follow-up questions. So in terms of instructional design, I could have Robert Mager, who created the three-part objectives, debate with Gagne about the best way to implement these objectives for first-year learners. And that way you get debates. You could have Lincoln. A debate that I did was I had a 60s activist discuss the meaning and importance of the Vietnam conflict versus an activist from the 21st century. And you get different responses back based on that historic period and what reviews and potential things people said. So you can use debates, question and answer, analogies and examples. Use these things to guide the imagination and creativity. As you learn more about it, you'll be able to convey this more to students. I've got some resources here at the end, and I'll tell you, I have my contact information at the end here, and I'm sure it's available elsewhere. If you want any of the slides, I'll be more than happy to send the slideshow directly to you, so you have all the prompts and examples. And it'll also give you this list of teaching tools that I've used to develop my first initial experiences with AI tools in the classroom. Here's my contact information. And it looks like we've got about 5 or 6, 7 minutes to go over the chat as well. And we'll look at some of the examples. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of...
Sean, I just want
Yes,
to
ma'am.
interject. We do have a question in the Q&A.
Yes. Okay.
Do you disclose the use of AI to create your lesson plans and activities to the students and faculty?
The ones I haven't used them. I haven't told them about them in the classroom yet, because the topics that I've done, like for the CRAP method, is so close to what I'm using for. I just use it as a guideline to go through. So I haven't responded with that for my bibliographic sessions yet. I have in my course and my for credit course with my graduate students this semester, we have an AI policy that's in place. They're allowed to use it as long as they disclose it to me. And I've disclosed to them in parts of lessons. I haven't used it to generate any complete examples yet. But what I have done is I've used it to update my lessons that I've used for course. So there was, for instance, no AI and the history of bibliographic instruction in there. So I put a couple paragraphs in there on my history of instructional design to show how AI is being used in there now. So yes, and that disclosure is becoming more, it will become more apparent as I have them using it in the classroom as well. We still don't have formal policies in place here for instructors or students, so I'm kind of feeling that out as I go, if that answers your question. I'm going to go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I see a couple of requests in the chat for the slides.
I'm going to go ahead and put it on the first prompt slide because that was the first question I saw for goals and objectives. I'll make this a little bigger. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat questions now while we look at that one. Thank you very much for the positive feedback. Let's go to the top. Grocery store. We're on the first prompt now if you wanted to see that one. The 9 items. Okay. For Gagne's 9 events of instruction, those 9 items, yeah, I'll go ahead and show you. And I can probably pull it up here. I mean, that's something you can actually Google very easily. 9 events of instruction, but I'll bring them up and I'll talk through them in just a second here. So I hope you've had enough time to see the first one. I'm going to go down and we'll look at the lesson outline. So here's the prompt for Gagne, 9 events of instruction. And you can look these up and compare them. I actually went through, I have my instructional design book, but I'm not sure what page it's on. But I did double check each one of these to make sure that they were congruent with the textbook that I'm using. And so they are. Gagne's, he's been around since the 60s and did military training. So still in practice today, but the 9 steps are gain attention, inform learners of the objectives, stimulate recall of prior learning is 3. Then we present the content, provide learning examples, and presenting the content in the learning guidance, that would be kind of in the bibliographic demonstration, where you would get feedback from the students as they go along and give them guidance to adjust their searches. Elicit performance, that's when we do a practice activity, provide feedback from that practice. And what you've seen, a lot of times we do that walking around the classroom and looking at screens or asking students what results they got from a database search. We did a short quiz or evaluation. Sometimes I will just have students do a search and write down the first 3 examples that they got and tell me if they're relevant for their topic, or we might have a multiple choice question, but it helps give guidance to the lesson. All of these things, I kind of build rough outlines when I do my BI sessions, and they include, I'm going to search for this in this database, and this is the result I'm going to look back. But using Gagne's 9 events of instruction, help make sure that you include all of the conditions for learning that you want so that you can get the best possible outcome that you can, especially in that 45 to 50-minute session. So we assess performance and then find reasons for them to take this further and use it in their coursework or everyday life. So for the examples we use for CRAP session, you know, that we would use these for academics, but also to make good purchases or wise decisions online. And thank you so much for putting Gagne's 9 events of instruction in there. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I did double check them in one place, so I'm gonna make sure they were correct with my book. I'm pretty sure that they're right. And that's one of the things that you have to check to make sure. You can use the Q&A features. Questions gonna be okay. 10 minutes left. Yes, in fact, if you didn't get my information on the last slide, I'll conclude with that, but go ahead and send me an email too, and this will be recorded and online too. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it and you got something out of it. This has been a learning experience for me, so I hope that you can take this and use it for your own classes, instruction, and personal use. I'll tell you, it's not real good for references yet. I did something where I had to write a reference list for a proposal that we're doing, and some of the things were just non-existent. I couldn't find them in Google Scholar. If I can't find them in Google Scholar or WorldCat, they don't exist. So it's not so good about that, but I found a lot of things that I used to Google questions. I don't have to go through a list of results. It will tell me pretty accurately. And you go through a process of learning where you double check your results, but after a while you become more confident using it. And that's basically all that I had today. I'll put my slide screen up there. If you want slides, please feel free to send me an email and I'll send you all the entire presentation.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Sean. This was awesome.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yes,
and we'll
thank
see
you
you
so much for
tomorrow for the
All right, we'll be here.
continuation. All right. Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.